Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm Jano Lieber, MTA Chair and CEO, and I'm going to thank a lot of people at the MTA at the end, but I'm going to get to it right now. Today, we are incredibly excited to unveil the next MTA capital program for 2025 through 2029, and we're doing it right here at the Corona Yard, which is the heart of the number 7 line. The reason is this is one of the best performing lines in the entire subway system, and it's really a model for what we are trying to accomplish all over the city and all over the region. We all deserve the number 7 train quality experience, a 2 to 3 minute headway during the peak, 4 to 6 minutes in the off-peak, made possible by first-class modern CBTC signaling, and it delivers consistently 90% plus on-time performance. That kind of transit makes all kinds of good things happen. Look at both ends of the number 7 line. You have the incredibly booming Hudson Yards neighborhood, office, retail, and residential. Over on the west end of the number 7 line in Manhattan, out here we have Citi Field and the planned major residential developments at Willard's Point, along with even a brand new soccer stadium. This is what quality mass transit makes possible. And we just had a record-breaking US Open with more than 1 million spectators, the majority of whom did the smart thing and took mass transit. But we can't write the story for every neighborhood and for every New Yorker who depends on the system unless we maintain a high level of investment in the MTA. Listen, the $55 billion 2020 to 2024 capital program was a huge step. It has made a difference, but now we need to build on this momentum, and we are proposing a new $68.4 billion program for the next 5 years. Listen, we get that $68 billion is a big number, but I'm confident that it is the right number. Don't forget, what we're talking about with our mass transit system in the region is an asset that is worth $1.5 trillion. That's trillion with a T. And part of that incredible system, frankly, has been left to deteriorate for decades. We got to deal with this. 40 years ago, then MTA Chair Dick Ravitch brought transit back from the brink of collapse with the first MTA capital program. In that era, the MTA bought thousands of new train cars and buses and miles of track. Now those cars, those subway cars, are past their useful life. They need to be retired. And even more important, Ravitch, Bob Kiley, all of my forebears and foremothers didn't get to everything that needs investment. Critical behind-the-scenes infrastructure, things like the power systems, signals, communication systems, and even basic stuff like the structure of the elevated trains, the structure of our subway tunnels, are basically been left untouched and allowed to continue to decay. A lot of that infrastructure is over 100 years old. If the MTA system is going to survive, let alone grow and prosper, we're going to need to deal with that stuff. We can't put off dealing with it any longer. Now, last year, our team conducted the single most comprehensive review of the whole MTA system that's ever been done, the 20-year needs assessment. There's a state law, and it requires that the report, that 20-year needs report, go deeper and be much more transparent than years past. So what we delivered, we cataloged 6 million different assets so we could get a sense of what we need to preserve and what we need to really improve in this vast $1.5 trillion system. At the same time, we also considered the changing patterns of travel and the growing threat of climate change. All of that factored in to that 20-year needs report. Now, that 20-year blueprint, which was published last year, helped us shape the 5-year plan that we are so proud to present today. But in order to figure out what the size of the program ought to be, We also looked at external benchmarks. We asked JP Morgan Chase, the largest financial outfit in the United States, to compare us to other systems like utilities and freight railroads that have huge networks of aging infrastructure. Their analysis, using benchmarks drawn from other industries, said to us that we really need to be investing massively in MTA capital, that in order to bring the system into a state of good repair, it would require something like over $20 billion a year, over $100 billion over 5 years. That's a huge piece of information. Then we looked at what we could realistically accomplish in terms of construction and procurement, given the size and capacity of the New York area construction industry. It's not unlimited. We looked at that. And we also looked, and this is important, at how much work we can do in our transit system without doing harm to the caliber of service, without really undermining the rider's experience. We need to still keep service going while we do all this work. So that's how we got to today's proposal, a plan that is meant first and foremost to arrest decay of aging elements of our 100-plus-year-old transit system. But I need to emphasize, all this unsexy work that I'm talking about will bring improvements to riders. Old subway and railroad cars that break down 7 times as frequently as new cars. So people who are riding on those lines with older subway cars, you know who you are, you're going to get fewer delays because of equipment failures. The power system failures, when they happen, they knock out hundreds of trains. Just ask New Jersey. Just ask the people who have been living with the catastrophe that is the New Jersey transit system these last 6 or 9 months. These are the exact rider impacting issues that we're trying to address with this new capital plan that we're proposing today. Every New Yorker is used to hearing announcements, delays due to signal malfunctions. So when we replace and upgrade 75 miles of signals, as we are proposing to do in this system, it reduces that risk to our rider experience. And new signals also mean much better on-time performance. On the number 7 line, on-time performance surged 23% when we turned on those new CBTC signals. Likewise, accessibility. We are proposing 60 more subway stations to be made accessible in the next 5-year plan, and 6 more railroad stations. By 2029, with this level of investment, we will have achieved more than half of this old system finally getting true ADA accessibility. And through those stations, we will be serving more than 75% of riders. We're making sure to invest in the things that we need, but we're also leaving room for expansion with projects like the Interborough Express. Governor Hochul has been a major champion of that project, and it's not hard to understand why. More than 60% of IBX corridor residents commute within Brooklyn and Queens rather than Manhattan. A more direct connection will give them time back with their families. Now, can I have my book also? And the governor always talks about time with families as something that she values. We've heard that from her again and again, and that's super, super important. Somehow or another, I've lost my pages. Okay. So IBX is definitely part of this plan. But I also want to note the capital program is going to deal with the MTA's fare evasion issue in a serious and long-term way. We're proposing to invest $1 billion in new turnstiles, all new, what we call the fare array, where people pay to prevent fare evasion. And in so doing, what we're going to do is we're going to be preventing, it's not just a law enforcement issue. What we're trying to do is to protect New Yorkers from excessive fare increases that would be brought on by allowing fare evasion to continue to grow. Now, there's a lot more work in there too, but the bottom line is this is the right program and it's the right size at $68 billion. Listen, the New York City Controller, Tom DiNapoli, who's widely acknowledged as a serious and consistent reviewer of MTA capital needs, says we need to be investing this much or maybe even more. Now, I know that the question we're going to face quickly is, how are you going to fund all this? But my question is, how do you not? How do you not invest in a system that is the lifeblood of the city, that is where every New Yorker interacts with government most frequently, that is a place where New Yorkers experience community every day? How do you not invest in that? Now, obviously, there's a lot of work to be done in Albany, and I've already begun working with the governor's team about plans for the upcoming 2025 budget season. And the governor's released a comment on the plan that I think is very helpful. I know that she understands the importance of what we're trying to do here, because the success of our transit system is totally intertwined with the success and affordability of the city and the region. Remember, mass transit is one of the very few things that makes New York affordable, and we got to keep it that way. Our partners in the state legislature, at the City of New York, and partners like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries in the federal government all get this too. Now, people haven't always felt hopeful about the transit system. Many of you, like me, were around in the 1970s and 1980s when this system was at a bad point. The current capital program was born out of another challenging moment, the summer of hell in 2017, when the transit system was really at a low ebb. But in the past few years, we have seen on-time performance and ridership rebound all over our mass transit system. And for decades, our obligation to make the system truly accessible to all New Yorkers in compliance with the ADA was neglected and underfunded. But I am so proud that we have turned that around. We have turned that around by accelerating ADA projects 5 times as fast as the MTA has ever done before. And we have demonstrated that the MTA can and will deliver on projects big and small, on time and on budget. So this is our moment. We have the opportunity to secure New York's future, and we gotta grab it. Before I turn it over for further discussion to Jamie, I need to thank everyone at the MTA who has worked so hard to bring us to this moment. My team, John McCarthy, who grew up a few blocks from here in Queens, Jessica Matthew, who did so much to prepare this program, Juliet Michelson, Chief of Staff Laura Wiles, the agency presidents who are here, Kathy Sheridan, Rob Free, Demetrius Critchlow, Kathy Rinaldi. She's only president of one agency right now, just to be clear. And the whole team at MTA Construction and Development who led this. The amazing planning group led by Frederica Cuenca and Alyssa Cobb-Conan, Tim Mulligan and Steve Lohr, who crunch the numbers and do what we call the development, Mark Roach and the project management team. But it's all under the leadership of one great MTA thought leader, Jamie Torres Springer, and I'm going to turn it over to him right now.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. You know, the MTA is a great institution with a lot of support in it, but nothing beats having a chair and CEO who is deeply invested in and engaged in the long-term investments that we need to make to sustain service within this system. And we certainly have that. I know everybody knows that in Jano, but we're all very grateful to him for his leadership, and his command of the substance comes out even in his introduction. So we take great pride in being responsible stewards of this extraordinary transit system, And the proposed plan that we're releasing today is the next step. Jano's right that the 7 line reveals a lot about the current and future potential of our system. Yes, it's CBTC enabled, which has led to a 23% improvement in on-time performance. That's thanks to both the work that we did on the 7 itself and the new CBTC-equipped rail cars that serve it. And it's been part of an expansion to Hudson Yards in recent years. But it also shows us the need to continually invest in the system's state of good repair to maintain safe and reliable service, and how we go about doing that. Recently, we rebuilt the Main Street Flushing Station, the second busiest station in Queens, to create more stair capacity and improve elevators. Right now, we're making 3 more stations on the 7 ADA accessible in Queens. You saw them if you took the 7 to get out here today. That's out of 37 in construction across the system. We're making structural repairs and renewing 6 more stations, plus doing track work in between them. In Manhattan, the 7 station at Grand Central is getting an overhaul, and we're adding capacity for riders to transfer from the 4, 5, and 6 lines. That takes nothing less than building a new tunnel in the middle of the busiest central business district in the Americas. We're proud that we've done that on budget and on time, and we're proud that we're confronting that problem and making that investment. After Sandy, we rehabilitated and protected the tunnel between Queens and Manhattan, protecting it from future coastal storms. And we're here at Corona Yard, a great example of how investing in the behind-the-scenes support facilities can make a world of difference for the service that we provide. All this work is complex, but we're not shying away from these investments to improve the customer experience and strengthen the system for the long haul. The proposed plan that we're releasing today takes that same approach, applying this kind of comprehensive investment all throughout the city, Long Island, and the Hudson Valley. So let me talk quickly about how we got here. We went from the bottom up and the top down. Bottom up, as Jano said, we created a new capital planning division at MTA Construction and Development that looked across our 6 million assets and prioritized them. Some examples of that: 2,000 rail cars across the subway and the railroads are reaching more than 40 years of age. More than 200 substations, power substations across the subway and railroads are in poor or marginal condition. 69% of the subway system runs on outdated signal technology. And we look at things from the top down too. What is the right investment level for an asset base like this, worth $1.5 trillion, 100 years old, and given the inflation that's impacted the MTA just like everyone else in America in the last 5 years? We're pleased that independent work that Jano mentioned by JP Morgan, the State Comptroller, and the Citizens Budget Commission are validating our approach. When you look at the total budget of $68.4 billion in this context, it's right in line with all of those recommendations. So what are the key elements? We're setting 3 major goals with this plan. What results New Yorkers can expect from the next stage of investment: continuing to provide frequent and reliable service. That's all about state of good repair. We have to prioritize that above all else. Improving the experience for our customers and taking action against the existential threat of climate change. Let me give you some highlights from the very visible projects that our riders will see and appreciate to the behind-the-scenes work that keeps the system running safely and reliably. New rail cars, $10.9 billion for 2,000 rail cars, 1,500 for the subway, 500 for the railroads. This enables us to retire all of the outdated 1980s era fleets that put reliable service at risk. But it is a lot coming due, and it represents a 2.5 times investment from the current 5-year capital plan. We'll make more than 66 stations, We'll make more than 66 stations ADA accessible across the subway and railroads with a $7.1 billion investment. That's at least 60 stations for the subway system alone. And in the subway station, it will take us to more than half of our stations ADA accessible, serving 75% of our riders. We'll make a major investment, more than $1 billion, in modernizing our fare array to make the system more accessible and comfortable for all our riders and to combat fare evasion. What defines the customer experience in our system is those rail cars and the stations. We'll invest nearly $8 billion in improving our station environments, rebuilding 28 railroad stations, and making priority repairs at 1/3 of our subway stations. Our system is vast and we're focused on taking care of it, but where there is great opportunity to serve New Yorkers with improved transportation options, we will do that. That includes the 14-mile Interborough Express, our first light rail line, which will connect vast sections of Brooklyn and Queens to each other and to 17 subway lines and the Long Island Railroad. We're also making room in this plan to expand capacity and electrify important sections of lines for Long Island Railroad and Metro North. Less visible, but just as important to keeping great service running 24/7. We'll make a $2 billion investment in our service facilities, the shops and yards, including especially the Livonia and 240th Street shops, and the yards that ensure service gets started each morning. We'll continue to replace and upgrade our signals with modern communication-based train control with a $5.4 billion investment, and improve signals on our railroads too. In addition to getting at least 4 new critical lines done for over 75 miles of the subway, we're going to finally confront the bottlenecks at Nostrand Junction and DeKalb Avenue that slow down the 2, 3, 4, and 5 and the NQ, B, and D all day, every day for riders in Brooklyn. We'll make state-of-good repair upgrades to signals on 4 lines on the railroads too. We'll invest in our critical structures and upkeep of our track. We need to continue rebuilding the 100-year-old Grand Central Artery that brings Metro North service from the Harlem River into Grand Central Terminal. We're already rebuilding the Park Avenue Viaduct and the first section of the train shed underneath Park Avenue. Now we must continue that work to avoid the aging of those facilities catching up to us, and we'll do so with a $1.7 billion investment proposed in this plan. That's emblematic of the need across our entire system. That's why this plan will protect 20 miles of elevated subway structures, fix thousands of defects in subway tunnels, and rehabilitate dozens of bridges and viaducts across our railroads. They require a $9 billion investment to avoid closures or worse, dangerous incidents. That's critical state-of-good repair work that we have to catch up on. Another component you don't see but is so critical to putting on good service is our vast power network, much of which is over 50 years old and in need of repair. Every power event delays more than 30 trains. This plan will invest $4 billion in renewing and repairing the most critical components in the power system. And we have to respond to climate change aggressively. We can only confront these long-term effects with concerted action starting now. We'll invest over $2 billion in resiliency across the system, including protecting over 20 miles of the Hudson Line from the rising Hudson River and the steep slopes on its other flank. That goes for our subway system too, where 200 of our 472 stations have been hit by heavy rainfall events in the last few years. Continuing our investments, we will directly protect more than 20 stations and facilities from flooding and continue to work with the city to keep water from inundating our stations. The MTA avoids 20 million metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions per year, but we're also committed to an 85% reduction in our own emissions by 2040, and this plan invests in continuing that effort with $1.4 billion for 500 more zero-emission buses and the upgrades to bus depots that charge them. That's our plan. It's ambitious, but it's what the system needs, and it will benefit the whole region in untold ways, with jobs and investment, from construction firms on Long Island to small businesses in Brooklyn to engineers in Westchester, all the way up to suppliers in the North Country and manufacturers in the Finger Lakes and all across New York State. And with $6.5 to $7.5 billion in contracts for minority, women, and disadvantaged business enterprises and service-disabled veteran-owned businesses. And we are well-positioned to deliver. Outside reviewing entities like the Building Congress and Citizens Budget Commission have endorsed that the new MTA is delivering better, faster, and cheaper. Our efficient bundling and our recent work to award major contracts using alternative delivery models and our aggressive project management will enable us to get this critical work done. We have the evidence to support this. Record contract awards, $900 million saved on projects we've awarded since 2020. Hundreds of millions of savings in support costs. Before I wrap up, I also want to thank the many dedicated MTA C&D officials who got us here today. Many of them are here. In many ways, they've been working for the last 5 years flat out since the last capital plan, and they've done an extraordinary job. Too many of them to name. I also want to acknowledge the great partnership we have with our operating agency partners from the leadership who are all here today on down. You can now find the complete 2025 to 2029 proposed plan at mta.info/capital plan. We look forward to getting this work moving in early 2025 and to supporting the future of the region. Thank you.
All right, let's do questions, starting with Andrew Sif of WNBC. We're going to go on topic and then deal with other business afterwards. Andrew.
Thank you very much for the first question. It's a nice honor. My question is going to sound dumb, so I apologize. How do you explain to New Yorkers who are not sort of tuned in to the minutia of how the MTA pays for things, your shift in tone from a couple of months ago when you were explaining to New Yorkers you were doing everything you can to prevent the system from falling apart since congestion pricing got paused? They're not as familiar with how a capital plan works. How can you explain to them sort of the rosy optimism just 3 months later?
Well, here the message is the same, which is we need to have resources in order to invest in the system so it doesn't fall apart. With respect to the congestion pricing pause, we flipped what projects we were working on, so we would prioritize those kinds of projects until that issue was resolved. Now what we're saying is, big picture, there's a lot of the MTA that has never been addressed, that's falling apart, that's over 100 years old. Power, elevated structures, underground subway tunnels. You can't subject concrete to water, chemicals, and salt for 100 years and not deal with the corrosion and the collapse risk. So that's what this program is about, is continuing what you heard from me a couple months ago, which is you always have to prioritize keeping the system moving. But that is a benefit to the riders because it will eliminate the things that cause delay.
Just as a quick follow-up, if congestion pricing had not been paused, would this capital program you're putting out today look exactly the same?
Exactly the same because the MTA's needs, in order to serve our riders with the best possible service, we have to fix the stuff that has not been paid attention to. That's what we're about today.
All right, let's go right next door. Evan Simko-Bednarski, the New York Daily News. He personally went to the Livonia shop, which is part of this plan. Evan.
I asked if they'd let me fix the trains. They said no. Question for you.
Good call, TWU.
Very much. Question for you, one, just a clarification, but then sort of a larger picture question. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about what there is in here to fix some of the bus depots that are also similarly in rough shape, but also just sort of wider. Kevin Willens told some reporters yesterday that this is about half of this has a funding stream identified. Can you talk a little bit about what the work is in the coming months to identify the remainder?
I mean, honestly, Evan, you know how the system works. Is the MTA's job is to propose a responsible minimum capital program that will address the ridership's needs. Timely, reliable, safe service. That's what we do, and that's what we're starting today. Then the board is going to take action on it next week, and then it goes to Albany. They're the decision makers ultimately about how to put the funding package together. Governor in the lead, mayor, to each of the leaders of the two houses of the legislature. The process is the MTA proposes, Albany disposes. That's when the question about funding is going to be answered.
The proposed plan does have funding available for improvements to bus depots, and we'll get more specific about that as we go. One of the ways we're doing that is by moving to the battery electric bus fleet. because when you look around at our bus depots, I mean, the one that we have here is in very good condition, but many of them, like Livonia Shop or 240th Street, they're just too old to be able to handle the charging infrastructure that we need to install. So that's why we've taken action. We're rebuilding Jamaica Bus Depot, which will be the first all-electric depot. We have a public-private partnership to rebuild the Gun Hill Road Depot that's advancing. And then as we bring on these new electric buses, we have funding that I mentioned in the plan to ensure that we can repair those depots so that they can accommodate new charging infrastructure.
All right, if you look up at the grandstand next to the tennis center, we have Newton Jones Burke at the third right there from Channel 7 Eyewitness News. Newt.
I'm not going to hit a forehand here, Tim, though, thank you. Mr. Lieber, what would you say to...
Comments are sometimes backhanded, but go ahead.
See, Tim writes the best lines, doesn't he? Mr. Lieber, what would you say to people who might say that you're making promises you can't keep?
Honestly, as I said before, Newt, the point is we have to propose a capital plan that will serve New Yorkers. Albany has to resolve how to fund that capital program. And you know, you've already heard a couple times all of the experts out there, including the state controller, the Citizens Budget Commission, JP Morgan Chase has said our proposal is very much in the range of what's responsible and needed. Now we turn to Albany to see how to address it.
So if I can follow up on that, it sounds as if you've got a lot of programs. I mean, you sound confident that it's going to happen. What's your degree of confidence?
Listen, here's the bottom line. Last year, the MTA faced, in its operating budget, not the capital budget, a real financial challenge coming out of COVID. It's no secret. Albany stepped up. I believe that the players in Albany get that this is the lifeblood of the city's economy, that the transit system is one way to preserve and enhance affordability, equity, making sure everybody can get to a job, get to school, get to medical services, and how important it is. That's why I'm optimistic in spite of all the challenges.
If you go right behind you there, Gregory Mocker from Pix 11 News, starting the new transit segment tomorrow morning. Go ahead, Greg.
Good morning, team. I looked up the last capital plan, 2020 to 2025, and it does have a direct line about new funding sources, central business tolling program to ease congestion. Should we read into that not being mentioned in your initial remarks here? And isn't there always some uncertainty anyway about paying for the thing?
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. The key function of the statute requires, the law requires the MTA to propose this kind of capital program. And it says that we have an opportunity to comment on funding sources, but the bottom line is the responsibility is to Albany, includes in this process the mayor, by the way, who has a role in this, to decide how to meet the MTA's needs. We're just laying it out for the public to understand. We got a lot at stake, and we're emphasizing just how much needs to be done.
Before, though, you used the phrase before. Is it a part of this? Is that term still?
No, very important to understand. It's a good point that you're bringing up. The congestion pricing issue that the governor has indicated she fully intends to resolve is part of the current MTA 2020 to 24 capital program, not going forward. So she's going to have to address it. She said again and again that she will, and we've said again and again we do take her at her word, but that is not part of the new capital program. That's part of the existing program.
On to Jose Martinez from the city. Jose.
Jenna, you've said repeatedly, and you just did seconds ago, you take her at her word on the existing capital plan, the current one. I'm guessing, do you take her at her word for everything from here on out as well?
Listen, I think I've said what you just heard me say, which is I really do believe that all of the players in Albany get how important this system is to New Yorkers. Basic quality of life, equity, affordability, our ability to continue to grow the economy. New York only functions because of its density. That's where all of our economic dynamism comes from. We can't function without great mass transit. They need to figure out how to make sure that we can not just preserve the system so it doesn't fall apart. It's 100 years old, but also improve it in New Yorkers' interest. I think they get that. That's why I'm optimistic.
All right, same group, Sam Lebman from New York 1 right there. Sam.
The governor did put out a statement, and it didn't sound that optimistic. She said that she will fight to secure as much funding as possible, and that includes pressuring Washington to deliver additional infrastructure dollars. But if Trump is elected, that may mean less infrastructure dollars for New York. And she also said that she'll determine priorities and capacity during upcoming budget negotiations, which sounds like she may not fund everything in this capital plan. What would you say to that?
I would say that, of course, we understand that the governor is playing on a very big field that includes healthcare and education and countless other state priority. And the part of the statement that I thought was very heartening was that she will fight to maximize funding for transit. And I think that the other leaders in Albany feel that way too. Sam, as far as the election, there's no question that there's a lot at stake in the presidential election. I'm not going to comment on it, but I will say that historically, transportation funding has continued through changes of administrations and changes of parties, and I think it is reasonable to believe that that will continue. But that doesn't mean that we don't need Albany to step up and take action come the next budget, and you're right to point that out.
And over to Steve Nessen from WNYC, Gothamist. Steve, New York Public Radio.
Hello, friends. Just to change the topic a little bit, drill down, get a little more specific. Two quick things. One is, how come none of the numbered lines are slated to get new signals? And on the new fare array, as you've said, you know, half the fare evasion happens at the exit gates. How's the new fare array going to address that at the exit gates?
So the new fare array, the wide exit gates, which will now, for the first time, have normal access for people with strollers, with luggage, people with mobility issues, people in chairs, that will play the function of the exit gate now. So it will allow you to eliminate the exit gate. That's the factual answer, Steve. Okay. So. What was there was one other question. The number line. It's a simple fact. We need to start the process of buying the cars that will serve the IRT, the numbered lines, that are CBTC equipped before we can build out the signaling. So that's why you see lots of money for IRT cars. That is the first step to getting those lines resignaled.
All right, let's move across to...
I'll just add one thing, which is those numbered lines are also getting major investments that will improve service and reliability a lot. New rail cars, also dealing with the bottleneck at Nostrand Junction, lots of ADA investments, lots of investments in track, station conditions, so we're certainly making an investment in those lines.
Let's go to Alonso Castillo, representing the people of Long Island at Newsday. Alfonso.
Hello. A couple of questions related to the Long Island Railroad. First, regarding the rail car purchases, is the plan exclusively to replace the M3s, or are you actually looking to grow the fleet beyond the 100 M3s that you would replace?
I'm looking for clarification on that. Yeah, it's the total investment is 160 cars, which will replace the M3s and give us some additional capacity. Am I saying that right, Rob? Thanks.
And then secondly, I know there's some money there. I asked you about this yesterday, Jamie, to look at expanding some of the branches. It specifies looking at electrifying to Yaphank, but not Port Jefferson. It talks about other improvements for Port Jefferson, Montauk. Can you talk about the decision making there? I know Port Jefferson's been at the top of a lot of people's priorities on Long Island.
I just want to make it clear. There's no decision to favor one over the other. There are multiple proposals for electrifying or improving or expanding the branch lines at the eastern end. And I think all you heard in that is we're going to look at all of them, and there's significant funding once that evaluative process is able to take place. There's significant funding available to advance those projects a long way.
And Rob Free is here from the Long Island Railroad to add to those comments, if he chooses.
To the original question on the fleet, I know there are some diesels also that would be purchased. So how many would be electric train cars?
Well, as we said, the passenger equipment for electric cars would be 160. We're also looking at our dual mode locomotives. We're looking at purchasing around 40, give or take, maybe a couple more dual mode locomotives to replace the current fleet. We're actually also looking at passenger coaches to begin the process in this capital program to start adding capacity for our diesel fleet and work locomotives as well. Our work locomotives are over 50 years old, so this capital program will address our fleet across the board. Very excited.
All right, up in the mezzanine, we've got Doug Williams from CBS 2 to wrap up the on-topic portion of the proceedings. Go ahead, Doug.
All right, thank you. Sort of similar to Andrew's question, just about the connection or lack thereof with congestion pricing to what you're announcing today, given that the average person's going to hear MTA funding budget and think of that. And to that point, the TSTC just released a statement urging Governor Hochul to change her tune on congestion pricing, re-implement it, end the pause. They say in order to fund this crucial program, we need congestion pricing now. So how are folks supposed to read that and then think that these two things are separate?
Well, I mean, listen, the impact of the congestion pricing pause was we had to delay, not cancel, some ADA projects, some signal projects, some zero emissions buses. This plan wants to go even further in those directions. So what New Yorkers need to understand is we need a lot of stuff to make sure that the MTA gets better and continues to survive, doesn't fall apart. The projects that were being funded by congestion pricing, which the governor has said she will take care of, are one category, but we still have a lot of other stuff we need to get done in the next 5 years. We make sure that all the structures don't fall apart because water and salt and chemicals have been hitting them for 100 years. We need to make sure that the power systems, which look like the land that time forgot, don't fall apart like they have in New Jersey, which has been cruel to New Jersey Transit and Amtrak passengers. We have to make sure that we don't hurt riders by letting the system fall apart. There's more to do even after the congestion pricing issue is resolved.
All right, folks, what we're going to do, and for those on the live streams, we're going to play a 3-minute video that is going to be out in the world shortly. Then we're going to come back and take off-topic questions from the press here. So first, wrapping this part up, 3-minute video. Then we'll get to your off-topic questions in about 3 minutes.
What makes New York, New York? Density, activity, dynamism, and it's the MTA's vast network of subways, buses, and trains that supports more people, more jobs, and more activity than any other place in America. As I like to say for New Yorkers, mass transit is like air and water. We need it to survive. Millions of people from all communities depend on the MTA every day. It's our version of a town square. It's the most affordable and convenient way to get around, and the greenest. The MTA is, by a very significant measure, the largest transportation system in the Americas. Assets worth $1.5 trillion, more than 9,000 train cars, 6,000 buses, 700 stations, plus all the tracks, depots, and other infrastructure necessary to support all of that. Running this century-old system requires constant maintenance and continued investment, not just for ourselves, but for the generations of New Yorkers who will follow us. We need to prioritize transit now so that they will have more opportunities in the future. That's where the capital program comes in. Every 5 years, the MTA charts out a wide-ranging plan of investments necessary to modernize, fortify, and expand New York's transit system so it continues to run smoothly, reliably, and frequently. In recent years, thanks to the capital program, the MTA has expanded accessibility with new elevators and escalators at dozens of stations, upgraded signals on key lines, the L, the 7, the E, F, M, and G trains, enabling all of them to give more frequent and more reliable service. And we've painted miles of bridges to protect that critical infrastructure from the elements. We've made countless behind-the-scenes improvements that riders appreciate even though they don't see them, like revamping the pump rooms and the communication systems to deal with the reality of climate change. We've changed the way we do business, creating a new, streamlined construction operation to deliver projects faster, better, and cheaper than ever before, while creating tens of thousands of jobs across all of New York State. Looking ahead to the next 5-year plan, we're picking up the pace with bold projects like purchasing thousands of new rail cars so that we can retire nearly a quarter of the subway fleet, as well as a very significant share of the railroad's oldest trains. We want to add 500 new electric buses to leave a greener footprint and move us towards a truly zero-emissions bus fleet. We want to upgrade at least 60 more stations with ADA accessibility in all 5 boroughs. And we'll be bringing new signals to the A, C, N, Q, R, W, J, and Z lines, and a host of other improvements that will benefit the entire system. There's no New York without mass transit. It doesn't exist. And it's not just our past or our present. Transit is our future. The future rides with us.
And we are ready for your off-topic questions. We start, coatless for this. All right. Let's start with Newton Jones, Burke, the third, Eyewitness News. Newt.
Thanks again, Tim. Mr. Lieber, there has been a report the police are looking for leads on 2 people who apparently somehow managed to gain access to a train that was out of service and actually move it down the rail bed. I'm wondering how, first of all, how that happens and what MTA is doing to prevent incidents like this.
I'm going to let Demetrius Critchlow take that one. Sure.
So there's no question it was a extremely foolish and reckless act of 2 individuals accessing live track in order to get access to our train. The train was moved approximately 50 feet, but I think there's one thing that's clear. We've continually said that we have cameras and we're aggressively installing cameras. We're at approximately 70% of the fleet right now have cameras in them, and these cars specifically do. So we have great video which has been turned over to the police, and we're confident that they will get the people, the perpetrators in this case.
In order to run it? I mean, is that something that's sort of user-friendly? You can step in there and drive the train?
It's unclear at this point, the experience of the 2 individuals, where they got it. But, you know, I'm just confident that the police will have all of the investigation and tap into that knowledge of their experience when they catch them.
All right, Sam Lebman right over there, New York 1. Sam.
Oh, thank you. There was a bus driver beaten up the other day. You know, it's not supposed to happen with these new barriers. You know, are there any new precautions being taken? And again, you have this new criminal justice advocate. Is this helping at all with any of this? And
well,
also, one other question in terms of what happened on Sunday. You know, obviously, this is not what you meant to happen when you want to crack down on fare evasion. So,
number one, bus driver. Attacking an MTA employee, and the law was changed a couple of years ago, at our strong urging, with the support of the governor and the legislature, is a felony. You beat up an MTA employee, it's a felony. One of the principal responsibilities of our new criminal justice advocate is to work with the DAs to make sure they know that and that they charge it as a felony. Because what can't happen is MTA employees just doing their job, getting attacked, getting harmed, and the criminal justice system letting people walk. So we're very militant on that issue. You attack an MTA employee, you should, the full weight of the law should go against you. The episode on Sunday, just to be absolutely clear, first of all, a lot of sadness and tragedy, and for passengers, my heart goes out to the passengers as well as everybody else involved. But that was not a fare evasion issue. It was that somebody had a weapon, they brandished it at police apparently, and they wouldn't respond to commands. And I'm not going to get involved with what went on, because that's going to be investigated both by police internal, they have an internal affairs process, the DA, and also the state has a look at any instance where there's use of force against an individual by a police officer. So there's going to be a lot of investigation to get to the bottom of what happened and rights and wrongs. But this wasn't strictly because of the fare evasion moment. It was because somebody was carrying a weapon into transit. And lo and behold, the next day, you know that we've been trying to do more on bus fare evasion. And the next day, an MTA cop, I think it was an MTA cop, was doing fare evasion enforcement on a bus, and he got a guy with not just an outstanding warrant, but who was carrying a loaded Glock pistol. So we have to keep weapons out of the system, and I do support that effort.
Yeah, could have been an NYPD officer, but let's go to Jose Martinez right there from the city.
Hi, Jenna, and hello again. And I'm sorry, Demetrius, but this one might be for you. Feeding off of NJ's question about the someone taking control of a train car. Some months back, I apologize, that was loud. Some months back, we wrote about efforts that transit was doing to put new locks, or to explore biometrics to keep people out of those cabs. Where do things stand on that, Demetrius?
So we did do a full evaluation of a new lock mechanism in cooperation with the NYPD, one that requires, it would be an additional lock to what's out there. So we have the design in place. It's just a matter of getting the actual parts and starting installs.
Is there a timetable for when you might be able to have the fleet upgraded on that front?
Not at this time.
All right, Doug, did you have another question? You're good. Steve, Nessen to close us out, I think, on the off topics. Steve?
Hello again. In January, I believe changes to fare evasion penalties go into effect that the legislature approved last year. And those are efforts to encourage riders to pay. I know you said just now the incident on Sunday wasn't about fare evasion, but to the public, it was. It was about police chasing someone down for $2.90. So I'm curious to hear from you, how do you think the efforts to encourage riders to pay with these, lessened penalties, how much does that incident on Sunday set us back or set you back? And it really, further enrages the public to see, people being shot over $2.90. Whether that's the fact or not, that's what the public says.
No, I mean, that's your message. That's your characterization.
That's what I'm reading from the public.
No, I think that I also hear from an enormous number of people. Part of our motivation for starting to take on, I mean, it's no secret, this is not fun. I don't love that we have to deal with fare evasion, but we have to be responsible. And one of the reasons, not just a matter of money, it's a matter of fairness. Because what I hear, what reaches me most on an emotional level is when people of limited means say, I am trying to play by the rules, and it's not fair that all these people walk in the gate. And that I might have to pay a larger fare because they choose not to. Transit is one of the few things that makes New York affordable. We cannot allow people just making the fare optional, which eventually will force the fares to go up. It's not fair to the people who are trying to play by the rules and raise their families that way for us not to create a system. And that's why in this plan that we've laid out today, we are actually proposing to invest $1 billion in changing the turnstiles. Fare evasion went up very suddenly during COVID. Lots of behaviors broke down. And now we have to change the physical environment and not just make it a matter of policing or enforcement, but also motivating people. Now, Stephen, I'm going to go on just a little bit longer because I'm passionate about this. One of the reasons we did the Omni card is not just to give kids more access to all the things that make it good to grow up in New York City. I grew up here, and I had a bus pass and a subway pass, and I went all over. But it's to make sure that they get in the habit of being MTA customers, that they have an Omni card, that they don't, lose their bus pass and then they can't get anyone for another 6 months. We're working with the schools to have a civics curriculum about why it's important to be a New Yorker who participates in the fair. So it's a fairness issue, and it's a civic kind of like a New York citizenship issue, and it's not, we don't want it to just be an enforcement issue.
All right, thanks, Jano, Demetrius, Rob, and all the transit workers here at the Corona Yard for having us into your work home. We appreciate it. And that's it from Flushing this afternoon in Corona.